On a certain twilight, this little girl was terrified as she was about to be attacked by Goblin Mukbang. Fortunately, a boy stood up to shield her. From that moment, his image was deeply etched into her mind. One morning, a blue-haired girl approached Lost and asked to form a team with him. Lost thought he misheard and asked again to be sure, but the girl confirmed that she wanted to join. She introduced herself as Narcina, a fighter, while Lost clarified that he was a healer. Just then, another woman rushed over since everyone already knew Lost's face. She came to stop Narcina. This was Amherst, a staff member of the Mardat Adventurers Guild branch. Amherst asked Narcina if she knew who that young man was. Narcina honestly replied that she didn't know anything, so Amherst explained that Lost was known as the Incompetent One, a healer who could only use basic recovery magic, the kind even children could use, let alone adventurers. Lost had previously been part of the Inazuma Divine Sword team but was kicked out, and since then, townspeople had always called him useless and incompetent. Naturally, he was also poor, so Amherst advised Narcina not to team up with Lost lest she end up in poverty. But Narcina said she had money, so it wouldn't be a problem. Hearing this, Amherst could only sigh and advised her not to boast like that because there were many scoundrels among adventurers. Narcina smiled in thanks, saying she was new to the profession and still learning. Amherst, being practical, offered to introduce Narcina to better teams, for a fee of course, but the young girl immediately declined, saying she had already decided to form a team with Lost, a wish that wasn't impulsive, but something she had considered for a long time. Amherst was surprised but still processed the paperwork for them. They would sign a team formation document and submit it to the guild to receive missions. This document also served to divide rewards equally, and if disputes arose, the guild would mediate. While waiting for Lost to complete the formalities, Narcina kept looking at his face. She had finally met him again. When everything was done, Narcina was overjoyed because they had officially become a team. Afterward, they began their first journey to the Martat Labyrinth, a place where no one had yet conquered the deepest level, and no one knew what kind of monster was the true master of the labyrinth. Being new to the profession, Narcina relied on Lost for everything. She anxiously asked if suddenly going to the labyrinth was safe, as the guild staff had warned that it was very dangerous and that newcomers should go to the beginner area in the Western Plains instead. Lost knew that place well and explained that due to magic leaking from the labyrinth, there were many monsters outside, and the Western Plains were the easiest hunting ground, hence called the beginner area. However, that area was too vast, making it difficult to find monsters to fight. He suggested that the first level of the labyrinth would be more stable. With plenty of monsters, they just needed to avoid the deeper levels. Hearing this, Narcina trusted him completely and followed. At the entrance to the labyrinth, being a fighter by nature, Narcina insisted on going first to protect her healer teammate. Lost agreed to let her lead. Entering the labyrinth for the first time, Narcina felt both nervous and excited. When encountering weak monsters, she quickly defeated them all. After the monsters were slain, they dissolved, leaving behind some magic stones items that the guild purchased as materials. Narcina curiously asked about their purpose, and Lost explained that the stones contained magic power that could be used in various ways, but the details would take too long to explain, so he told her to learn about it later. Narcina wasn't good with theory, so she just nodded. With 5 magic stones, they earned enough for their daily expenses. Lost suggested going deeper to have a chance to encounter stronger monsters. She agreed immediately, promising to protect him if anything happened. Continuing to the second level, Narcina almost stepped on a trap, but Lost noticed it in time. He used a stone to trigger the mechanism, which amazed her. When she asked how he knew, Lost replied that he could recognize traps by the color of the stones. He added that for new adventurers, falling into such traps would likely be fatal. As they went deeper, they unexpectedly encountered an orc, a powerful and sturdy monster quite different from ordinary ones. Lost said there must be some issue, and Narcina thought they should turn back. But he said that with good coordination, they could still defeat it. Surprised but trusting, she took on the task of attacking first. She fought bravely, but the monster's body was too hard, making each strike feel like hitting stone. A fragment from the floor flew up and grazed her arm, causing her to lose focus. She was nearly cornered against the wall when Lost suddenly rushed forward and delivered a swift finishing blow. That moment reminded her of the hero who had saved her years ago. That person was Lost, and that was why she wanted to join his team despite being ridiculed by others. After the battle, Lost asked if she was injured and healed her. She was surprised that an incompetent healer could do this. He simply said he had been useless for so long that he had to learn to take care of himself. She didn't ask further. Looking at his hand healing her, Narcina could only smile happily. Their spoils included a purple magic stone, which was much more valuable. Lost asked what they should do next, and Narcina said she was still energetic and wanted to fight more. He indulged her, and they continued hunting monsters until the afternoon. When they returned with a pile of magic stones, Amherst was stunned, defeating that many monsters in half a day was rare. When she noticed the purple stone from the orc, Amherst scolded Lost harshly for going into the labyrinth when she had told them to go to the beginner area. Lost explained that the monster had come up to the upper level on its own, and Narcina confirmed this. Amherst calmed down, saying that similar incidents had occurred recently. It seemed the labyrinth was having issues, and she warned them to be more careful. After selling the magic stones, they earned quite a bit of money. Amherst also received a commission, which made her happy. Lost explained to Narcina that guild staff received a percentage of the magic stones they purchased. Narcina was shocked, as she had never earned so much before. Amherst mentioned that Lost had been exploited before, but now that he had formed a team with her and the money was divided equally, he was earning more. Lost realized he had been mistreated, but just smiled, saying the past was past, and now he had a new teammate. Amherst's superior, Handsome, saw Lost with his new member and asked about it. She explained that no one would let Lost join their team. Narcina had voluntarily formed a team with him. Meanwhile, Lost and Narcina went to a familiar restaurant where even the waitress recognized them. Narcina happily shared stories, while Lost didn't care about the rumors that the incompetent one had found a beautiful teammate. When renting rooms, she surprisingly wanted to share a room, but Lost refused. She was a bit sad but still happy to be with him. In her room, she recalled childhood memories of when Lost had saved and healed her, just like today. Since then, she had vowed to become an adventurer and form a team with him, a promise that had now come true. Although Lost didn't remember, Narcina had never forgotten. She had trained relentlessly, and as soon as she heard that Lost had been kicked out of his team, she immediately registered. Because her hair color had been different back then, he didn't recognize her. What made her sadder was that Lost was so strong that he didn't need her protection, even though she had promised to help him. Nevertheless, she tried to keep her spirits up. Then she silently wondered why someone as wonderful as Lost was called incompetent by others. In his dream, Lost remembered why he had been considered worthless. Back then, he and the Divine Sword team were trying to conquer an extremely terrible monster. The battle failed because no one was prepared. Lost had advised them to bring antidotes, but no one listened. When they failed, everyone blamed him, saying the incompetent healer couldn't help at all. Fortunately, the monster didn't pursue them to the end, so they escaped death. But the result was that Lost was expelled from the team. The news spread, surprising the entire Adventurers Guild. The swordsman in the team spoke bitter words, making Lost the scapegoat. The girl with him was no better, angrily blaming their failure to defeat the Hydra on Lost's inability to cure poison. Over time, people's looks became increasingly contemptuous, but Lost didn't bother to defend himself. The team had 4 people, and 2 of them constantly criticized Lost. The remaining one was a lowly who was given the authority to judge who was right and who was wrong. The girl was terrified of the swordsman, so when pressured, she tremblingly pointed at Lost, causing him to be immediately expelled from the team. Recalling all this, Lost tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Perhaps that first shock had left a deep mark on his mind. After leaving the team and being labeled incompetent, Lost still tried to join other teams, but things got worse. During one hunt to defeat a horde of monsters, his new teammates pushed him out as bait. Realizing he was being used, Lost could only fight for survival. In the end, he survived, while those who betrayed him paid with their lives. Witnessing their miserable deaths, Lost still didn't give up his dream of becoming a true adventurer. Despite being lonely and wounded, what hurt him most was not being recognized despite his many efforts. One day, while wandering in the forest, Lost happened upon a horse carriage under monster attack. Inside, only a little girl remained alive. Unable to fight, he still rushed in, risking his life to save her. To this day, Lost still doesn't understand why he did that. When the girl's escort team arrived, he was treated as a hero. However, Lost always thought the real saviors were the knights who came afterward. Nevertheless, the blonde girl insisted that thanks to Lost, the escort team arrived in time, and even praised him for looking cool. Those words greatly lightened Lost's mood. Seeing she was injured, he used basic recovery magic to heal her. The girl thanked him, but Lost just shook his head, thinking he hadn't done anything great. After hearing Lost's story, the blonde girl was moved to tears. She couldn't believe someone had been exploited to the point of being used as monster bait. She promised that when she grew up, she would become an adventurer to protect him, making Lost smile. The girl was a noble's daughter, so there was actually no reason for her to become an adventurer. But her promise helped Lost regain his spirit. Later, Lost trained under a master. He learned the combat skills of the strongest adventurers and finally could walk his own path. As good things gradually came, Lost was grateful for that promise from years ago. He didn't realize that the little girl from back then was Narcina. That morning, Narcina knocked on Lost's door to wake him up for the new day. She smiled and invited him to breakfast, saying they couldn't take on missions on an empty stomach. After eating, they went back to the labyrinth. planning to go a bit deeper as Narcina's abilities had stabilized. They reached the teleportation area, where ancient magic formations had existed for hundreds of years. The teleportation formations in the labyrinth were said to have been created by human mages to help later generations explore more conveniently. Narcina curiously asked why, if the ancients could create teleportation formations in the labyrinth, they didn't connect them directly to towns for convenience. She guessed they might have feared monsters would use them to escape. Lost explained that monsters couldn't use these formations, and moreover, the technique had been lost long ago, and creating them was extremely costly, so people couldn't build them elsewhere. They then teleported to an area with an ominous red glow. The dangerous-looking scenery worried Narcina. From here on was considered the middle level, where monsters were much stronger. Lost had been here before, so he was quite confident, knowing the monsters here were fast and fierce. They quickly encountered their first group of monsters and defeated them all, except for one with a transparent body. It was a spirit, a creature without a physical form, against which physical attacks were useless. He advised Narcina to retreat, but she stayed, saying she had a special skill. Lost was surprised because such techniques could only be used by experienced adventurers. He stood as bait so she could concentrate her energy. The monster didn't attack immediately, so they were still safe. When Lost turned to provoke it, the creature gave chase. Narcina channeled her energy, focusing her power into her fist. Through years of training, she had mastered a flow of energy that could penetrate non-existent entities. Her fist dispersed the spirit, leaving behind a large magic stone. However, being her first time touching an evil spirit, Narcina suffered a mild burn, but it could be healed with a magic item. Lost explained that for weak people like him, magic items were essential as they enhanced treatment effectiveness. The materials to craft them mainly came from magic stones in the labyrinth. After recovering, Narcina was surprised by how quickly it worked. They decided to return since they had already obtained significant spoils. As usual, they brought the magic stones to Amherst for purchase. The guild employee was delighted to see them bring back so many valuable items, and she received an additional commission, so she wished them continued success. That evening, both Lost and Narcina were happy about selling the magic stones at a high price. On their way back, they encountered several groups of adventurers arguing. Lost suspected they were plotting something, while Narcina remembered Amherst's advice that it was best not to get involved. Lost sighed, feeling annoyed but not knowing what else to do. Since they had earned quite a bit of money today, he invited Narcina for a lavish meal. The restaurant owner immediately asked if they had enough money, making Lost laugh and say they had been doing well these days. He ordered a beer to cool down, and Narcina also wanted to try one, but was refused by the waitress because she was too young. Lost also agreed she shouldn't drink, which made Narcina pout. Looking into the distance, Narcina was curious about the white towers erected around the city. The architecture was unusual, with no windows or entrances. She had seen them not only here but in many other places as well. Lost didn't know much either, only that the people built them as requested, while the builders didn't understand the purpose. The identity of who made the request remained a mystery. Since the white towers caused no harm, no one cared. Lost just thought they should have built city walls instead, because if attacked, such an open city would be difficult to defend. Narcina believed that with so many adventurers here, no faction would dare to wage war. As night fell and they returned to their rooms, Narcina was about to say something but stopped herself. She blamed herself for still not having the courage to tell him that she was the little girl he had saved years ago. Nor could she express her wish to share a room with him. Lost was just happy to have found a wonderful teammate. Lost's former teammates were still recruiting new members to prepare for another attempt to conquer the Hydra. The swordsmen boasted that this time they had invited a beautiful healer, which made the girls in the team visibly uncomfortable. The Inazuma Divine Sword team arrived at the Hydra's location. Margulis asked healer Lyra to fight alongside him, with Armia providing magical support, while Saberia would sneak around for a surprise attack. Hearing this plan, Lyra was confused, since no one would normally put a healer on the front lines, but they had always seen Lost fight like a normal person, so they thought it was natural. Lyra knew no healer would be that reckless, so she had to explain this to the team. The blonde man looked contemptuous, saying that although Lost only ran around, he occasionally landed a critical hit, and the previously severed head was actually his doing. Yet they naively thought they were strong enough. Lyra could only heal, not fight, but because she had detoxification abilities, Margulis was confident that was enough, as the Hydra's strength mainly came from its poison. Today, Lost's duo collected quite a lot of magic stones. Amherst knew they had gone down to the middle level to hunt monsters, so she was a bit worried. But the number of stones they brought back reassured her somewhat. Narcina said that Lost always treated her well, never exploited her, and that they were very careful when choosing monsters to fight. However, her big sister still reminded them that everyone has limits, not to take unnecessary risks, and advised them to recruit more members to make monster hunting easier. With additional warriors or mages, dealing with dangerous monsters would be more favorable. But Lost wasn't thinking about recruiting yet. Although he knew that with more people, income would be better, he felt their current earnings were sufficient. Amherst believed that with a little more diligence, they would soon be able to afford their own house. She didn't understand fully, so Lost explained that well-off teams usually rent houses to live in and use as bases, which were both more comfortable than inns and prevented issues with storing money or equipment that could be stolen. Moreover, for couples in love, having a private home would avoid scrutiny and help nurture their relationship. The Inazuma Divine Sword team had previously rented a villa, but Lost had been forced to sleep in the dockhouse. The two women felt sorry hearing how badly he was treated, but Amherst thought that Lost's expulsion might have been a good thing, as that team was now facing countless troubles. Meanwhile, the other group returned in terrible condition, somehow defeated even more badly than before. Lyra spoke frankly, saying they were too weak compared to the Hydra, and it was lucky they survived at all. But through this battle, she realized that Lost, who had been kicked out of the team, was actually the strongest member. It was thanks to him they had survived. Unfortunately, the others didn't recognize this, still thinking they were elite. Saberia advised Margulis to call Lost back. Though he hated being told what to do, Margulis planned to follow her advice the next day for the team's benefit, delusionally believing that no one would refuse an invitation from the Divine Sword Inazuma. The next morning, Armia woke up, found her body had recovered, and thanked Lyra, but when she went to look for food, she realized the other two had gone out. They were at the Adventurers Guild inviting Lost back, shocking everyone who heard. When Narcina happened to arrive, Lyra told her that Margulis had bullied Lost, which immediately enraged her. Meanwhile, Margulis still thought Lost would agree, believing that someone as weak as him couldn't survive without them. He spoke arrogantly, making Narcina angry. Lost was confused, not knowing how to refuse without hurting others, which made Margulis think he was just hesitating about the reward, so he offered a higher salary, even criticizing their current healer as useless. Saberia could only shake her head, not understanding such stupidity. Narcina stood up to protect Lost, clearly stating that he wouldn't return to that filthy team, because he was now her valuable teammate. When Margulis tried to bully the small girl, Lost stepped in to stop him, thanking him for the invitation but affirming that he already had a new teammate. Hearing this, Margulis became furious, accusing Narcina of taking advantage of Lost, and falsely claiming that she and Lyra were only after money. But Lost grabbed his hand, his strength causing Margulis pain despite his armor, enough to make him understand the vast difference between them. Lost made it clear that he didn't hate anyone in the team, despite being exploited. But if anyone dared harm Narcina, they would pay the price. The pair left, leaving Margulis fuming. He ran to Amherst, asking her to find someone stronger. He wanted a frontline warrior, determined to defeat the Hydra. At that moment, an adventurer wearing a mask approached, asking to join. Margulis didn't care about their identity, only wanting to test their strength. As a result, his weapon was knocked away after just one strike, amazing everyone. Although Saberia advised against accepting this mysterious person, Margulis agreed, as rumors of their repeated failures were spreading. The person called himself Sheeg, but it was clearly a fake name. The next morning, while Narcina was changing clothes, she heard a knock on the door. It was Lost informing her they had visitors, Lyra and Armia. The two came to apologize for past events. Armia honestly said she had no right to ask Lost for help, but still begged him to join their team to defeat the Hydra, as Margulis had hired a strong warrior but was too foolish to buy antidotes, endangering the entire team. Lyra also advised that without Lost, they would certainly die, as he had saved them all before. Narcina was angry, not understanding why Armia still wanted to help that jerk, just to repay her duty as a teammate. She asked what Lost was to them that they kicked him out, while knowing he was treated like garbage. Armia cried, saying she was afraid of being removed from the team and that no one else would accept her, so she had to ignore it. Hearing this, Narcina said nothing more, letting Lost decide. Finally, he forgave them, saying he didn't hold grudges against anyone and that the past should be left behind, but he couldn't rejoin the team. The restaurant owner brought food, easing the atmosphere. Although sad, Armia was grateful for being invited to eat. Afterward, Narcina wondered how to get her out of that team, but Lyra just sighed, saying if there was a way, they wouldn't have come here. Lost gently reminded her to be careful lest she become the next person to be exploited. Lyra laughed bitterly, saying if she left, Armia might lose her life, so she could only watch over her. Upon returning, Lyra was shocked to realize the new warrior was someone she knew. After everyone left, she quietly asked, and it turned out to be Sheeg, pretending not to know her, for which she scolded him. She noticed he was using Ronaldo's sword and directly asked if he had stolen it, to which he replied that it was passed down by his master. After this poor attempt at disguise, everything became clear, but Lyra didn't want to make a big deal of it, letting him do as he pleased. Narcina and Lost continued their journey to eliminate monsters. With their current abilities, defeating ordinary monsters had become too easy, to the point where Narcina only needed a few strikes to finish them. She progressed at an astonishing rate, quickly becoming able to face 3 orcs simultaneously without difficulty. Lost suggested taking a break, but Narcina refused, saying they had just warmed up, and if she was tired, it was only because she was hungry. They sat down and took out their food. Surprisingly, Narcina had brought a large bag full of delicious dishes. The reason was that yesterday Armia hadn't eaten anything, so the lady at the restaurant had asked Narcina to eat for her too. The food was partly sold, partly given, so it was very cheap. While eating, Lost told her about the Hydra, a special monster covered in hard scales and powerful muscles, difficult to injure with physical attacks or magic. It wouldn't die as long as one head remained, making it nearly impossible for average adventurers to eliminate. Hearing this, Narcina became more worried about the Divine Sword Inazuma team, as the Hydra not only had terrifying physical strength but also spewed poison, which was even more frightening. Although antidotes had been researched and were sold everywhere, they were too expensive. So teams like Divine Sword usually sought healers with detoxification abilities not as effective as medicine but still useful. Lost believed they would be fine because Margulis, despite his arrogance, was very skilled with a sword, and as long as he maintained his performance and didn't underestimate his opponent, he was reliable. Saberia was the same, with top-tier speed and reflexes. Even with multiple heads, the Hydra would struggle to stop her. Hearing Lost praise others so much, Narcina showed signs of jealousy. Lost just smiled, saying he was only telling the truth. Later, Narcina wanted to explore a different area because fighting monsters in the same place was getting boring, so Lost agreed, suggesting they go outside to find stronger monsters to challenge. The Divine Sword Inazuma team was battling the Hydra. Margulis and Saberia charged forward, both familiar with the monster's movements. As Lost had said, the blonde Margulis could still cut through the Hydra's hard scales, and Sheeg was no less impressive, easily wounding it. About to chop off a head, Sheeg suddenly stopped, confusing Margulis. When asked, he explained that he didn't want to steal others' achievements, only to provide support. Hearing this, Margulis nodded, not wanting to appear weak either. Lyra could only sigh seeing Sheeg attacking head-on, while Saberia thought it was part of his charm. After healing Margulis, Lyra joined the battle, using her agility to lure the Hydra, creating opportunities for the two swordsmen to strike. The Hydra's strength gradually weakened, its movements slowed, and Lyra thought if they continued, they might win. Although magic wasn't very effective, Armia's fireballs still caused some damage. Suddenly, the Hydra used its tail to shatter a large rock, with fragments hitting Armia and knocking her unconscious. Losing their rear support, the battle situation immediately reversed. The Hydra frantically absorbed mana from Armia's body, then emitted a terrifying black gas. Margulis was stunned, not understanding what was happening, while Lyra explained in panic that the Hydra was evolving using the fear energy surrounding it, an extremely rare phenomenon that only occurred in the deep levels of the labyrinth. The monster regenerated its 2 severed heads, its strength doubling or even more. Sheeg immediately told Lyra to take care of Armia, while he would hold off the monster so everyone could retreat. But Margulis refused, charging forward to finish it off, only to have his weapon shattered against the Hydra's scales, now as hard as diamond. In that critical moment, a flash of sword light appeared. Lost and Narcina had arrived. Narcina threw a punch that made the Hydra stagger, while Lost caught the dying Margulis. Lyra recognized Lost and was surprised by his healing abilities, which were completely different from normal. He immediately requested cooperation, saying they needed to save Armia first because Lyra's magic wasn't enough. At first, Lyra thought it was impossible, but as Lost used continuous healing, Armia's body gradually stabilized. She was amazed because normal healing could only be used once, not stacked. Lost's old friends found this very normal, while Lyra needed a few seconds to understand that his use of magic far exceeded normal limits. She began to wonder who Lost really was to be able to do something so illogical. Armia regained consciousness, saw Lost and Narcina, smiled weakly, then passed out again. Narcina sighed in relief, but the Hydra had already regenerated and wanted to fight Lost directly. He understood and told everyone not to interfere. Lyra analyzed that after evolving, the Hydra had gained intelligence and could understand human language. The battle between Lost and the Hydra began, with the ground trembling repeatedly, poison, mist, and fire mixing in the air. The Hydra was so powerful it threw Lost backward. Margulis and Lyra could only watch, while Narcina fearfully called his name. Just as she was about to rush forward, an enormous energy burst forth. Lost's eyes changed color, and his body radiated an intense black and red aura. The Hydra felt threatened and hissed angrily. Lyra and Sheeg were terrified seeing this form, understanding that Lost had activated a sealed power within his body, something even the head of the Adventurers Guild feared. With a single strike, Lost cut off all of the Hydra's heads. Light flashed, then everything fell silent. The giant monster collapsed, turning to dust. Lost fainted immediately afterward from exhaustion. When he woke up, he saw Narcina sitting beside him, while Lyra was treating Armia. The small girl was out of danger, thanks to the antidote Lyra had just bought. Despite the cost, Lyra was happy to have saved everyone. Margulis demanded his share of the reward, and Lost agreed to divide it equally. But when he started demanding Armia's portion too, Narcina angrily hit him. Margulis furiously threatened to report to the guild. However, when they returned to headquarters, Margulis and Saberia were charged with crimes. It turned out that Sheeg was a member of the Royal Adventurers Guild, and this branch was just a subordinate. He declared that the two had violated rules, human trafficking, and exploitation of teammates. Hearing this, Amherst didn't dare object, as Royal Adventurers had the authority to execute criminals. Lost spoke up asking for mercy, saying Margulis and Saberia could still be rehabilitated, that they were just blinded by ambition. He hoped they would get a chance to start over, living up to the ideals of adventurers. Hearing this, Sheeg reduced their punishment, expelling them from the city but not stripping their titles. He said it was better to let them continue as adventurers under supervision than to let them fall completely. After this incident, Lost felt lighter. He knew this would be a big lesson for both of them. That evening, Sheeg revealed to Lyra that his real mission was to monitor the guild branch here, suspecting connections to the mutations in the labyrinth. He wanted her help, and Lyra agreed on the condition that Armia could join too, as she couldn't abandon her teammate. Sheeg accepted, and said he looked forward to working with them in the coming days. Early the next morning, Sheeg informed Lost and Narcina about forming a new team. He explained that this was arranged by circumstance, not necessarily his original intention, but the three of them possessed all the necessary elements of a standard team formation: strength, magic, and recovery abilities. Hearing this, Narcina turned to quietly ask the mage if she agreed. Armia just smiled, saying that she currently had nowhere else to go, so Lyra's help was something she was extremely grateful for. After hearing this, Lost also felt at ease. He encouraged Narcina to do her best in the new team, saying that although it might feel strange at first, with perseverance she would quickly adapt. Afterward, the group went to the guild to sell the magic stone obtained from the Hydra. Due to all the events from the previous day, they hadn't had time to do this yet. Incidentally, Lost suggested that Narcina try taking on some specific missions, explaining that being an adventurer wasn't just about hunting monsters, but also involved countless other jobs that helped them train and make a living. Narcina listened, surprised to see Lost caring about her future like this. Before she could respond, he leaned in close to tease her, making her blush. She quickly changed the subject and pulled Lost away, worried the guild might close soon. When they entered, both realized all eyes were on them. Lost guessed that news of him single-handedly defeating the Hydra had spread everywhere. Because of this, he warned Narcina to be careful, as someone might be eyeing their valuable magic stone. Sure enough, not long after, a group of adventurers approached them. Their leader wanted to speak privately with Lost. Though slightly cautious, Lost agreed. The man bowed his head and apologized for the past. When Margulis had framed Lost, and he hadn't dared to speak up, he blamed himself for being a coward, using team internal affairs as an excuse to ignore the situation, which caused Lost to bear a bad reputation for years. After hearing this, Narcina became angry, scolding him and saying that if he was truly sorry, he should kneel and apologize for 3 days and nights. Lost quickly stopped her, afraid she might go too far and get a bad reputation herself. The conversation then calmed down. Lost said that although he defeated the Hydra, he was still an incompetent person who couldn't use recovery magic like others, and hoped people would continue to call him that. The other man laughed, shook Lost's hand, and promised that if there were any difficulties, Lost could come to him. The conversation ended in a relieved atmosphere. When they brought the magic stone to Amherst for inspection, she nearly fainted from shock. What they brought wasn't an ordinary stone, but a magic stone from an evolved Hydra, so rare that its value was 10 times that of a normal one. She explained that to evolve, monsters needed to absorb an enormous amount of magical power, something that normally only happened in the deep levels of the labyrinth. Yet the Hydra had mutated right on the surface, which was highly unusual. Lost agreed, feeling there was something suspicious about this incident. Amherst confirmed that recently there had been many strange mutations in the labyrinth, making her suspect something was changing the magical structure. However, her authority wasn't sufficient to investigate. Narcina immediately asked why the guild wasn't taking action in a situation like this. Lost suggested they should request permission to form an investigation team to look into the cause. Just then, Handsome, the manager, approached and asked what was happening. After hearing the report, he just smirked, saying that strong monsters appearing was normal, and the guild wasn't free to care about such trivial matters. Lost objected, arguing that if ignored, other adventurers would be in danger. But Handsome coldly replied that those who chose this profession must accept the risks. If they were afraid, they should leave this town. Seeing this attitude, Narcina was furious, but Lost advised her to let it go. Amherst sighed, explaining that Handsome was such a perfectionist that he became dictatorial, and everyone under him was afraid. She also mentioned that the head of the guild branch had grown old and weak, so all administrative power was held by Handsome. Putting aside the unpleasant matter, Lost asked about available missions. Amherst presented a thick stack of commission papers. Narcina randomly selected a few, but they were all trivial tasks, causing Amherst to flick her forehead, reminding her that people would do anything for money. Finally, they found a mission related to the Fire Phoenix, a monster appearing in the middle level of the labyrinth that was hindering teleportation. The reward was extremely large, but so were the risks. Amherst cautioned them, saying this mission required a team composition of swordsmen, mages, and healers with area of effect recovery. However, this very requirement gave Lost an idea. He proposed collaborating with Sheeg's team to tackle this challenge together. Upon returning, Lost told the group about his plan. Lyra immediately agreed, seeing this as an opportunity to both monitor and cooperate with him. Armia didn't object either, only worrying that Lost might still be angry about the previous incident. But Lost laughed it off, saying everything was in the past. The team agreed to depart the next day. That day, Narcina and Lost went to submit their application and buy additional equipment. They had earned quite a bit of money from the Hydra incident, so they could afford to shop comfortably. Even though the team already had 2 healers, Lost still bought additional recovery potions, saying that combining herbs and magic would help heal faster. Watching him take care of everything, Narcina felt a bit sad, feeling like she wasn't being helpful. While lost in thought, suddenly a woman appeared and threw herself at Lost, hugging him tightly. Startled, Narcina reflexively threw a punch, nearly knocking the woman down. When she realized this was Lost's master, she was horrified and apologized. This master was known as the Flame Deity, a first-class battle mage. It turned out she had been asked by Narcina's father to find his granddaughter who had run away from home. Meeting both her disciple and granddaughter in the same team, she was both annoyed and amused. The encounter quickly turned into a verbal sparring match and then a magical duel between Lost and Ralma. But in the end, she conceded defeat and agreed to let the two continue their journey together. After Lost left to buy supplies, Ralma had a private conversation with Narcina, telling her she was foolish to leave home to follow a boy without telling anyone, and even hiding the fact that Lost was her disciple. Narcina lowered her head, but when she heard Ralma remark that he had dared to defy his master for her, proving she was very important to him, she blushed with embarrassment. As for Ralma, after completing her family matter, she began another mission, investigating the secrets of Old Mist, the head of the Martad branch, who seemed to be hiding a major conspiracy. Early this morning, Lost's team was ready to enter the labyrinth where the Fire Phoenix awaited. The group teleported to the location. Narcina had thought they would encounter the monster immediately upon arrival, but surprisingly, it didn't attack. Lost explained that in tight spaces like this, even the Phoenix couldn't fly properly, so they needed to go deeper to find a place with a high ceiling and enough space. They walked a bit further and found a very spacious area, from which Lost confirmed the Phoenix's nest must be nearby. Lyra mentioned that someone had recently discovered a new path, indicating no one had explored this place before. Fearing monster attacks, other adventurers avoided it, but if they could defeat the Phoenix, they would have the opportunity to access treasures and rare items. Lyra checked the residual heat on some stone slabs and concluded the Firebird was right above them. Lost threw a brick far away to create noise, as the Phoenix was known for its strong territorial instinct and would immediately attack upon detecting intruders. Shortly after, a giant fireball came hurtling down directly toward them. At the Adventurers Guild, Amherst joyfully welcomed a special guest. Just by glancing at Ralma's figure, she recognized her as a powerful adventurer. Thinking this visitor was the granddaughter of the branch leader, Amherst tried to be cordial, but Ralma said she was there to meet the old man and wanted to kill him. Hearing this, Amherst was confused and became even more alarmed when Ralma threatened to burn the place down if she wasn't granted a meeting. Handsome emerged from inside to stop her, saying he would personally handle the matter. Only then did Amherst realize this was Flame Deity Ralma, famous for her hot temper and belligerence. Handsome advised his colleague to leave, saying staying near her would only result in an early death. Back in the labyrinth, the battle had not yet begun. The Phoenix kept circling overhead, looking for an opening to strike, refusing to descend. Narcina realized that if it were just her and Lost, they would have difficulty defeating this monster. Lost silently wished he had bought a bow to counter from a distance. Narcina's carelessness made her a target, but fortunately, Lost rescued her just in time. He analyzed that this creature could shoot fire from its beak or claws, and even use its body as a weapon to charge. After Ralma clearly stated her reason for coming, she learned that others had also reported abnormal phenomena in the labyrinth. Handsome maintained his indifferent attitude, claiming these were just rare incidents. Ralma noticed that most adventurers here were unsavory characters, so she guessed the branch leader had summoned them. Handsome pretended to know nothing about it. Ralma grew more suspicious, as she had never seen white pillars appearing in the labyrinth during her active years. Handsome argued that those had nothing to do with the guild and asked what basis Ralma had for her suspicions. She simply replied that her intuition was very good. In a labyrinth town, the Adventurers Guild was the most powerful organization, and the branch leader was essentially a small king who could do whatever he wanted. Yet when asked about the situation, he pretended not to know and told Ralma to leave if she was dissatisfied. Recognizing that her opponent was hiding something, Ralma became convinced the guild was preparing for a dangerous event. She guessed they deliberately invited rogues to serve as sacrifices when the chaos erupted. Lost's group was still struggling. The rising temperature made the air thin. If this continued, they would have to retreat in vain. Perhaps the beast recognized the group's strength and chose to wear them down rather than recklessly charging in. Narcina was surprised that monsters could think strategically too. Lost asked Armia if she had any powerful long-range water spells, wanting her to target the wings to force it down. However, casting a powerful spell required a long chanting time, which worried Armia. The two men promised to protect her until the end. Lyra and Narcina also encouraged her, reminding her that this team was far different from the Divine Sword team before. Hearing this, Armia became calmer. The three close combat fighters charged forward, attracting the Phoenix's attention, while Armia began her incantation. When the spell was complete, a giant water arrow hit the Firebird's wing, causing it to stagger and fall. Lost and Sheeg immediately attacked, but the Phoenix quickly regained its balance. At the Adventurers Guild, Ralma and Handsome continued arguing about the labyrinth unrest. She believed that the continuous monster mutations were clear signs of a major crisis. Magical power was accumulating in the town. In the labyrinth, the Phoenix's strength suddenly surged. Its body transformed, and the flames around it changed into deadly fire. Narcina felt something was wrong, as they had encountered two mutated creatures in just a few days. Armia was trembling with fear, afraid death was approaching. Lyra understood that if the monster absorbed Armia's fear, it would become even stronger. The Phoenix now focused on Armia and charged straight at her. She stood frozen, unable to move from fear. Keeping his promise, Lost immediately shielded her, slicing the fireball in half with his magic sword. The intense heat almost made him lose balance. He shouted that he wouldn't let his teammates get hurt and urged Armia to stand up and cast her spell once more. Lyra supported from behind, helping Armia gradually regain her composure. The small girl closed her eyes, concentrating on her water magic, asking everyone for a little more time. Meanwhile, Ralma left the guild, determined to check the situation herself. She discovered that the white pillars in the labyrinth wouldn't burn even when exposed to fire, further confirming her intuition was correct. The battle below continued. When the Phoenix swooped down, Narcina threw an enhanced punch, but was severely burned due to the extreme temperature. Lost took position, attacking with his sword, but the blade melted. At that moment, Armia completed her spell, creating a giant ice arrow that shot straight at the monster. Lyra stood behind, continuously restoring energy to her sister. The ice arrow forced the Phoenix to lower its altitude, creating an opportunity. Narcina gathered all her strength to jump high, delivering a kick to the monster's head, causing it to lose balance. Lost immediately thrust his sword down, piercing its head. The flames extinguished, and the Phoenix turned to dust. Armia couldn't believe they had won. Having faced mutated creatures twice and survived both times, she burst into tears from emotion. Everyone encouraged her, saying it was thanks to her magic that they had won. The magic stone left by the monster was unusually large and bright, certainly worth a high price. When they returned to town, Lost didn't need to bear all the power as before, so he hadn't fallen into a demonic state. Lyra and Sheeg remained curious about this phenomenon, wanting to stay with him to learn more. In the evening, the group went to the restaurant and coincidentally met Master Ralma again. The two young ones were surprised that she knew they had just hunted the Phoenix. It turned out Ralma had asked Amherst, and just by throwing her a few silver coins, the girl had revealed all the information. Seeing them return safely, Ralma immediately guessed they had succeeded and demanded they treat her to a meal. Despite having money from selling the magic stone, the group still ordered only the cheapest dishes. Narcina had never eaten such food before but praised it as delicious, making Ralma laugh and say that even high-class food becomes boring when eaten too often, while the flavor of common food is more memorable. Narcina was actually the daughter of a count. Ralma revealed this without hiding anything, just wanting that foolish disciple to understand who the girl beside him really was. Lost suddenly remembered previously saving a little girl from that noble family, and only now realized it was Narcina. Handsome went to report to Old Mist about flame deity Ralma's appearance. Old Mist seemed very excited about the danger. The next day, Narcina and Lost went to the Adventurers Guild to collect payment for selling the mutated Phoenix's magic stone. However, the money pouch they received was so small that it made Narcina visibly annoyed. What's more, they had to wait quite a while for Amherst to prepare the payment, only to receive such a tiny amount. Narcina was irritated, but Amherst remained calm, telling her to open it before judging by appearances. It turned out that this time, the guild had paid them in gold coins, which looked small in quantity, but were actually of great value. Amherst explained that she had gone to great lengths to gather these gold coins, having to ask other branches for help and exchange currency with much difficulty. She quietly reminded Narcina not to keep the pouch open for too long lest thieves notice it. Afterward, Lost gave Amherst a little extra money as a token of gratitude, which made her happy. Thanks to this couple, she was able to get some benefits too. Suddenly, Lost left, making Amherst think they had argued. Narcina also felt confused and ran after him to talk. The town was bustling with stalls telling fairy tales about evil entities deep in the labyrinth, the evil dragon who would awaken after 200 years of slumber. The only one who could face it was the legendary hero. Narcina bought breakfast for both of them. She hesitantly suggested using the money they had just earned to rent a house. She knew it was somewhat abrupt, but thought that long-term renting would be cheaper than staying at an inn. Lost asked if there was any problem with their current lodging that made her want to move. Narcina really liked the place. It had good food and clean, beautiful rooms, but in truth, she just wanted to be alone with him. The inn was too crowded, making it difficult for their relationship to progress. She just hoped for a private space, where it would be just the two of them, and perhaps Lost might become bolder. This thought made her blush with delight, but Lost declined. He said they should continue living at the inn for now, as money should be saved for times of illness. Moreover, their group was only a temporary team, not an official one. Previously, Sheik had proposed forming a 5-person team, but they hadn't responded yet. Renting a house at this point wouldn't be reasonable. Narcina only wanted the two of them, but she also asked if Lost truly wanted to cooperate with Sheik. He said Sheik wasn't weak. The battle with the Phoenix clearly showed his potential. If they were to venture deeper into the labyrinth in the future, they would certainly need someone like him. Narcina just smiled softly, saying that as long as she could be with Lost, she didn't need to go to any deeper levels. That evening, they officially formed a team. To celebrate, the innkeeper and her daughter prepared a special meal. After eating their fill, Narcina became sleepy and was escorted to her room by Lyra. Sheik wanted to help, but Lyra said it wasn't necessary, reminding him to talk more with Lost. Since she was now part of the team, Narcina also demanded a private conversation upstairs, and so, the women opened a heart-to-heart talk session. After hearing about the morning's conversation, Lyra was shocked. Who would have thought Narcina would be so bold as to invite Lost to live together? But unfortunately, she was rejected, making her sad and afraid of being disliked. Lyra thought differently, believing that Lost truly valued Narcina. In her opinion, he was probably just shy, wanting to close the distance gradually before going further. Even men need time to get to know each other. Hearing this, Narcina admired Lyra even more for her seemingly experienced advice. Though in reality, Lyra had never been in a relationship herself. Lyra also admitted that she was struggling with her own romantic issues. Downstairs, Lost and Sheik were talking. Sheik said it wouldn't be a problem if those two lived together, as Narcina genuinely cared for Lost. He was only worried that outright rejection might cause her to misunderstand. When asked if he disliked Narcina, Lost quickly denied it. He remembered the first time they met, when he was in despair from being treated poorly, and it was she who gave him courage. Since then, she had always been by his side, helping him overcome his insecurities. Sheik smiled and asked if he loved her, making Lost blush with embarrassment. After taking a few sips of alcohol, he nodded in admission. Upstairs, Lyra told Narcina about her relationship with Sheik. They had known each other since their time in the royal capital, being in the same adventuring team. Lyra was beautiful, with many suitors, including one who pretended to join their team just to court her. When he tried to make a move, she resisted. When Sheik found out, he was angry with himself, unable to forgive himself for failing to protect the person he loved. After punishing the offender, Sheik left, and they only met again now. Lyra was never angry, just sad that he disappeared. She blamed him for not understanding a woman's heart. If he hadn't left back then, they might be a couple by now. Even Armia woke up to listen, completely enthralled by the love story. Sheik later confessed that when he met Lyra again in town, she was still willing to help him despite his terrible past. She forgave him, but he hadn't forgiven himself, which was why he maintained a cold attitude. Lyra understood his nature, knowing that this was already progress. The three girls inside all sighed after hearing this. Narcina wondered why Lost had rejected her invitation. Lyra said he must have his own reasons. Just then, the person holding the answer appeared. It was Amherst, whom Lost had asked to investigate Narcina. She opened her notebook and clearly stated that Narcina was the only daughter of a count, and there had been rumors that she was connected to the legend of the hero who defeated the Black Dragon. When the hero faced danger, the sleeping princess appeared and used magic to put the dragon to sleep, saving the one she loved. Amherst recounted that back then, Narcina's hair had been blonde, but after one night, it turned blue, as it is now something very difficult to explain. Perhaps because of this incident, her parents no longer prevented her from becoming an adventurer. Lyra had never heard such a strange story. Armia complimented her hair, while Lost became even more curious, which was why he had hired someone to investigate. Amherst didn't know the real reason but thought it might be due to something special, perhaps even related to the girl's life, which was why her family indulged her every wish. Nevertheless, Narcina was strong, able to defeat the Phoenix, so she couldn't be ill. After hearing this, Lost paid her generously. He still wanted to trust the girl, but couldn't help worrying that her master was hiding something. If her father objected, Lost said he would go with Narcina to ask for permission and do his best to help. All three girls were impressed after hearing this. A count's daughter who still pursued martial arts for a man and waited for him all these years. Lyra sighed, wishing she could be as brave as the younger girl. Afterward, the group enthusiastically encouraged the relationship. Narcina blushed and arranged to meet Lost outside for a heart-to-heart talk. Lyra also gathered her courage to confess to Sheik, saying that if he didn't mind, she wanted to be his lifelong companion. He froze, thinking she was talking about cooperation, leaving everyone in the house speechless. Lyra just smiled, saying that he had never before said he needed time to think, yet now he did, which showed progress. Narcina was also happy, having been invited by Lost to go out the next day. The story of the sleeping princess, the legend they mentioned, was actually a tragedy. To put the evil dragon to sleep, the blue-haired girl sacrificed her own life. Fate had decreed that the person with that blue hair would once again help the hero rise up and save the world. Narcina was eagerly waiting for her outing with Lost. Perhaps because of this, her mind seemed to be floating, leaving everyone around her at a loss. They had to repeatedly urge Lost to do something, as it was pitiful to see the young girl sitting in a daze like this. Lyra, being a woman, understood these emotions well. She knew Narcina was unsettled because of the previous night's invitation. Lyra wanted to know if the important matter Lost wanted to discuss was related to romance. Even Sheik advised Lost to resolve it quickly so they could accept the next mission. Lost, seeing the naive girl about to eat the decorative flower on the table, agreed to talk to her. He approached and called her softly, making her jump. She was anxiously waiting for sweet words when suddenly Chris appeared, covered in injuries, begging for their help. Lost immediately put aside personal matters and, along with Lyra, rushed to help Chris. It turned out he was a close friend of the innkeeper and her daughter, so seeing him in such a state pained them deeply. Fortunately, both Lyra and Lost were healers and were able to provide timely treatment, saving Chris's life. The two girls were quite surprised to see the innkeeper care so much about this young man. Chris was a childhood friend of her daughter. He had been an orphan since childhood, living in difficult circumstances but with a passionate love for the adventure profession, just like Lost in the past. The innkeeper's family often invited him for dinner. Just yesterday, Chris had come to boast that he had been accepted into a team. Hearing this, Lost immediately understood everything. He guessed that the reason Chris was severely injured must be related to being exploited. He asked permission to leave and went straight to the guild. Sure enough, the adventurers who were on the same team as Chris had been arrested. Under questioning by guild members, they confessed to using Chris as bait for monsters so they could escape. Lost didn't want to condemn them, only asking that they not repeat the offense if they didn't want to be permanently expelled from town. Others thought Lost was too merciful, but he warned that if they reoffended and he caught them, the outcome wouldn't be peaceful. Amherst was annoyed, telling him not to arbitrarily resolve conflicts between adventurers like that. She could only turn a blind eye, understanding that this matter wasn't simple. Others complained that the guild needed to take responsibility for allowing such villains to run rampant. Amherst explained that guild policy allowed all types of adventurers to join, so they couldn't select only good people. Lost couldn't understand why the higher-ups accepted such an operational method. Someone spoke up in opposition. He argued that Lost had no right to impose punishments, as those he had expelled were all legal adventurers of the town. According to him, Lost was the one who deserved to be removed from this place. Not wanting to cause trouble, Lost invited him into a room for a private conversation. He recounted the entire story of Chris and other recruits who had been exploited. There were good and bad people everywhere, but in this town, such situations occurred too frequently. Yet the guild remained silent, taking no measures. The other man felt that no matter what action was taken, it would be futile. The Adventurers Guild wasn't as powerful as people thought. They were understaffed, so they only prioritized tasks that truly brought results. Lost was angry, asking if they should just let orphan children be killed when all they wanted was to make a living. The man countered, saying no one forced them to become adventurers. There were many other jobs in the world that could earn money. Once they chose this path, they had to be aware that they could die at any time. He reiterated that if Lost couldn't bear it, he could leave the town and find a more perfect place to live. Lost remained silent. He still believed there must be a better way. The man looked at him and spoke as if recalling an old story. Years ago, they had heard a saying that adventurers always walked hand in hand with danger. The incompetent dying was natural, a law of the world that no one could change. After saying this, he asked Lost if he remembered him, then rolled up his sleeve to reveal a long scar. At that moment, Lost was stunned to recognize the person before him as Northern, his old teammate from years ago. Memories flooded back. Back then, they were both young men, dreaming of becoming adventurers. They had joined a team of nearly 10 people, being ordered to do menial tasks. Lost was strong and could endure, but Northern was weaker and often considered useless. Nevertheless, both persevered to earn their wages. Lost had wanted to help, but Northern refused. Then one night, while everyone was asleep, Lost sensed a horde of goblins approaching. He quickly asked his friend to wake the team and prepare for battle. But upon seeing the large number of monsters, everyone panicked and sought escape routes. The team leader then called the 2 recruits over and threw them down as bait. Northern was dazed, unable to believe he was being treated this way. Lost reassured his friend, saying the others had been using them from the beginning. Their purpose in accepting new recruits wasn't to train them, but to use them as sacrifices when in danger. Lost had experienced something similar before, so he knew well. He encouraged Northern to survive so they could expose those bastards. The 2 of them were lucky to escape death because the goblin horde was attracted to the larger group. In nature, goblins usually attack where there are more prey. The 2 waited until daybreak before escaping the labyrinth. When they heard the sounds of battle from afar, Northern knew the traitors were being hunted by goblins. Lost, however, said he would go back to save them if he could. Northern couldn't understand and asked why he would even think of such a thing. Lost simply didn't want anyone to die needlessly. Although this world was cruel, there was still a way for the weak to survive, as he himself had once been saved. Afterward, they parted ways, each going in a different direction. Now, Northern recounted that after that incident, an old man had helped him and accepted him as a disciple. That person was the current branch leader of the guild. Northern mentioned the old story today not to reconnect with the past, but to make Lost understand and leave this place. Lost didn't understand anything and tried to ask what was really happening. But Handsome didn't answer, only telling him to take Narcina away, considering it the final warning. Lost was called by Amherst. She said that recently, many people had opposed the actions of the branch leader and Handsome. The old man had just been promoted, causing many veteran staff to be dissatisfied. Amherst suggested they temporarily cooperate and asked Lost to help deal with monsters around the boulevard, as sooner or later, civilians would be in danger. Narcina curiously asked why this mission wasn't posted with a reward. Amherst explained it was a special directive from Handsome. As for matters related to handling other adventurers, she promised to provide information about troublemakers for Lost to deal with himself. Regarding the anomalies in the labyrinth, she couldn't disclose anything because it was forbidden, but she would try to subtly remind people to be cautious. She added that they could still earn money by selling magic stones obtained from defeating monsters. She was even willing to use her own money to increase the price, as a form of assistance. This surprised Lost, as it was strange for someone as money-loving as Amherst to take such a loss. Narcina also agreed, as eliminating monsters outside was the duty of adventurers. Meanwhile, Sheeg and Lyra were busy training orphan children, teaching them survival skills for self-protection. Narcina later joined in teaching martial arts to the little ones. When asked if he had discussed the important matter with the young girl yet, Lost suddenly remembered he had forgotten because he was busy with too many things. The scene shifts to Handsome, who is delivering a letter from the Prime Minister to the Master. The letter asks him to keep an eye on Narcina, who is believed to be the sleeping princess. Handsome asked why this girl was so important. The Master replied that the legend of the Black Dragon wasn't a fairy tale, but the truth. And soon, that creature would awaken, bringing destruction to humanity. Narcina, the girl with blue hair, was the chosen one to suppress the evil dragon. Main's group was now outside the town monitoring the monster's movements. They were gradually approaching, just as Amherst had warned. Lyra immediately requested an ambush to stop the goblin horde's advance. Lost didn't want any to escape, so he chose to set up an ambush. He didn't want to affect passers-by. They had to run quite a distance around, then approach from downwind so the monsters couldn't smell them. A while later, the group passed by the place where Narcina had once been attacked. Coincidentally, this battle also broke out at exactly that location. Narcina could now fight on her own, no longer needing Lost's protection. With her enhanced punch, she sent monsters flying into the air. Back then, the little girl could only cry, while the main character risked his life to fight for both their survival. Now, they could fight side by side, just as promised years ago. Since these monsters were quite weak, the group quickly claimed victory. A major earthquake shook the entire area, causing panic among the townspeople. Nothing similar had happened in many years. The terrifying event had officially begun. Upon returning to the inn, Lost quickly checked on the owner. Fortunately, no one was seriously injured. But right after, teammates came running with urgent news, asking Lost to come with them. Initially, they thought they would go to the guild, but instead were led to the outskirts of town. To be safe, the main character also called the whole team to follow. There, they discovered countless monsters gathering. More frighteningly, these goblins were much smarter than before, and among them were giants acting as commanders. The other group realized they were about to attack the town, so they deliberately intercepted them here. However, because there were too many, they still had to call for reinforcements. The matter hadn't been reported to the guild yet, so there would be no reward, but their only goal was to protect the town. Although the monsters were numerous, most were weak, with only the large ones being truly powerful. Lost charged forward to directly confront the leader, cutting off one of its arms. Surprisingly, the monster understood human language and spoke, stunning everyone. No one had ever heard of monsters that could talk. Regardless, Lost considered goblins as monsters, and monsters must be eliminated, showing no mercy. After those words, the team regained their spirits and continued fighting. The entire goblin horde was wiped out. But before vanishing, the leader left a warning about something even more terrifying that would come, and humanity would perish. It dropped a giant magic stone of a mutated species. Monsters appeared all around the town, their numbers constantly increasing. They were forced to retreat to return to the guild for support. When they returned, they were surprised to see the Adventurers Guild mobilizing all their manpower. It turned out that the higher-ups had just implemented a policy to increase rewards for eliminating monsters that escaped from the labyrinth by many times. Even Amherst didn't understand what Handsome was planning, as this policy was too unusual. He even allocated part of the reward to be paid in advance to boost morale. Many worried that evil adventurers would take advantage of this opportunity to flee, but Handsome didn't care, as long as there were enough people to protect the town. Sheeg realized that Amherst's superiors seemed to have prepared cash in advance, proving they had predicted the disaster. When the group's master appeared, everyone was surprised, thinking she had left this place long ago. It turned out she had also calculated that this crisis would occur. Ralma let Lost guess the cause. Based on previous lessons and the appearance of numerous giant monsters, Lost concluded this was a labyrinth riot. This phenomenon was documented over 100 years ago. A labyrinth riot occurs when magic accumulates excessively, causing monsters to rush out. If there are villages or towns nearby, they become the first targets of attack. To prevent this, adventurers must eliminate newly born monsters to absorb excess magical power. Adventurers are the neutralizing force that maintains energy balance in the labyrinth. Ralma recounted that the library in the royal capital still preserved many records of monster riots. Her grandfather had survived the disaster 100 years ago and had told her everything in detail. This town gathered many adventurers who eliminated countless monsters every day. If so, why was there still enough magical power to cause a riot? Ralma didn't know the real reason either. She asked Lost what he planned to do. He decided to build defensive barriers around the town. Residents around the inn generously contributed all their belongings to build barrier walls. Labyrinth riots usually lasted several days, so this was a wise choice. Nearby, several children insisted on going out to fight together. Manuel advised them to wait until they were older. He knew the little ones could provide first aid, support victims, or help Miss Mary prepare food. Understanding this, the children obeyed and turned to help the villagers. The great battle began. Waves of adventurers charged out to fight. Many used merchant carts to block the monsters' escape routes. Initially, there were only goblins, but later, mid-level monsters appeared as well. Ralma hadn't expected their attack to progress so quickly, reaching the town in just half a day. She immediately commanded Lost to reorganize the front area to prepare for battle. The sky gradually darkened, and suddenly flying monsters appeared. Lyra turned pale. This type normally only operated at night, indicating they were all mutated species. They screamed together, creating an eerie sound. Ralma began casting spells, burning the entire sky. The first wave of monsters was completely eliminated, but before they could rest, the second wave arrived. Ralma panted from exhaustion. Narcina asked her for more support, but was refused. She needed rest. Sheeg asked Lost if he wanted to continue, and he nodded immediately. Lyra was handling the healing, so the team plunged straight into the battlefield. During the fight, Sheeg almost slipped, but was fortunately saved by the legendary swordsman Ronaldo. He criticized the young man for being inexperienced, making the blue magic sword user want to cry. It turned out Ronaldo was Sheeg's master. Lyra was surprised to learn that her group was acquainted with legendary figures. Even Narcina had been trained by him, though she had never mentioned it. Narcina had studied under both Ralma and Ronaldo, but gave up because she wasn't suited for swords and magic. In contrast, the main character was Ronaldo's favorite student. Lyra even joked that the two looked like twins. He called the flame deity a fire demon because she was always hot-tempered. The blue magic sword he possessed was even more special than Sheik's weapon, helping everyone understand why he had once passed it on to his disciple. Ronaldo decided to fight in place of everyone else. Suddenly, Handsome appeared, shocking everyone. Ralma immediately recognized it as a type of magic that had been lost for hundreds of years. The branch leader had invited her for a conversation and welcomed guests in this manner. Ralma agreed, trusting that Ronaldo would continue to defend this place. Lost asked to go along, saying he needed to meet the branch leader. Handsome nodded, bringing Narcina along as well, since she was also involved. Before leaving, Ralma carefully instructed them not to do anything foolish. The old man was very powerful. Even if Lost used all his strength, he might not be able to win. Hearing this, Lost couldn't imagine how terrifying the other person was. As soon as Ralma finished speaking, she cast a spell, shattering the door as a greeting. The old man, seeing this, merely smiled. It turned out he belonged to the elf race, favored by the gods, and now he was perhaps the last individual still in existence. Knowing that the man before them was the master of their master, all three remained silent, not daring to utter a word. He was an elf, a race famous for their ability to control magic far beyond humans, and also the only elf who had lived for over 600 years. In other words, he was a mage who had mastered every type of magic in the world, someone even Ralma couldn't match. Initially, Lost had thought Ralma was a once-in-a-century genius who had taught herself magic. The man looked at Narcina, making the girl shrink back slightly. All three wanted to know the real reason he had summoned them here. After all this time without contact, it clearly couldn't just be to reminisce about the past. Seeing his former disciple speak disrespectfully, Mr. Mist felt a moment of sadness, but Handsome understood his teacher's intention. Mr. Mist reminded them that Handsome originally had no talent for magic, just like the main character who excelled in sword fighting. Although he couldn't learn any magic from him, Handsome still called him master because he had learned many valuable lessons. Mr. Mist praised this as the correct attitude of a student. Ralma asked directly about the main issue. Mr. Mist created tables and chairs for everyone to sit and listen. He admitted that all the events outside were within his calculations. Knowing in advance that the riot would occur, he had allowed evil adventurers to come here to be used when necessary, so that when they died, it wouldn't be a loss. The warnings to leave town were meant for righteous adventurers and civilians to keep them from getting involved. Ralma and her group had previously discovered unusual signs from the mutated monsters and wondered why they kept evolving. It turned out these were signs of an impending labyrinth riot. Narcina asked why they knew but didn't warn the people to prepare for evacuation. Handsome explained that they only knew a riot was coming but not when. If they spread false information, causing people to panic for a whole year while the riot hadn't arrived, the consequences would be even worse. Ralma realized this was indeed classified information that couldn't be disclosed. Mr. Mist said they weren't the ones causing the chaos, but were only following orders to keep it secret from above. Lost guessed that above meant the guild in the royal capital, but he shook his head, indicating it was even higher. Ralma immediately understood it was the person with supreme authority, controlling the entire adventurers guild of this country. Mr. Mist had no reason to hide anymore. This battle could last many days, and although some towns would be devastated, when the monsters ran out of magic power, everything would return to normal. The royal capital was too far away to be affected. Only small towns would suffer. The purpose of keeping it secret was to protect the royal capital. Mr. Mist, not wanting this to happen, had acted independently. Knowing that Ralma had realized this, he made his first request, to explain about the white pillars in town. They appeared harmless, but were actually barriers protecting the town from monsters. Maintaining the barrier required an enormous source of magic power. With the riot just breaking out, the adventurers, though strong, were all exhausted and couldn't handle this task. Therefore, he needed a heavyweight mage like Ralma. Currently, no one else had such a tremendous amount of magic power as she did. He himself was too old to provide energy anymore. Handsome said they would go directly to the deepest level of the labyrinth to fight the boss. The group was shocked, as until now, no one had ever determined its location. The guild had traced some clues, but Lost thought it was still too vague to risk his master's safety. Mr. Mist affirmed that if they could eliminate the boss, the labyrinth's magic source would be cut off, and the riot would end. Ralma finally agreed. Outside, Ronaldo and Sheik were still fighting, but the number of monsters wasn't decreasing. Manuel's group was being defeated by mutated demons. If they were just ordinary monsters, it wouldn't be a problem, but these had giant bodies. If just one got through, the children behind would be in danger. Sheik asked his master to help push them back, and of course, he agreed. Meanwhile, the main character was brought to the area that supplied magic power to the barrier. Everyone split up to act according to the plan. Ralma asked her 2 disciples to handle things outside, while she entered the center to operate the barrier. She didn't forget to warn Lost to be cautious of Mr. Mist. Lost quickly realized that the device could drain his master's magic completely, putting her in danger if the battle lasted too long. Right after, the barrier light shot straight up into the sky, covering the entire town. Only then did they understand that this town had long been protected by an invisible wall. The monsters panicked, unable to enter. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't break through. This was the most solid wall created by the flame deity. Thanks to this, adventurers could safely come and go, while monsters could only roar outside. The team's morale rose as they continued to wipe out the mutated creatures. Sheeg was exhausted and was allowed to rest by Ronaldo, while Lyra was breathing heavily but still tried to hold her sword to fight. Their area was temporarily stabilized. Armia was amazed by the barrier. Narcina explained that it was Ralma who was sacrificing herself to maintain it. If the battle lasted too long, she would be exhausted and unable to escape. Ralma had sent farewell messages to her 2 disciples, fearing she might not have another chance to return. While they were still worried, a giant monster appeared, charging straight at the barrier, threatening the entire town. It was an already extremely powerful creature, now enhanced. Ronaldo realized that if it kept attacking, the barrier would be depleted quickly, so he requested the group to go outside and fight. Lost was the first to step out, determined not to let his master be in danger. But she advised him to stay calm because there were still many others here. All 4 people with close combat abilities immediately charged out, clearing the way for Mr. Mist to advance deeper. After a period of fighting, the monsters suddenly retreated, as if they were terrified. Right after, a higher level monster than the Phoenix appeared. Just by looking, Lost and Narcina knew how powerful it was. Mr. Mist assigned the first one to Lost, while he focused on dealing with the second one, as he had his own reasons to save Ralma. Armia helped with support attacks, while Frenzy counterattacked fiercely. It charged so quickly that the main character only had time to block, asking Narcina to fall back. Thanks to his good speed, he was able to hold on for a while. Sheeg worried because Lost was gradually becoming exhausted. Seeing him fall, Sheeg immediately took his place, giving his friend time to recover. Despite being seriously injured, Lost still managed to smile, angering Lyra because of his reckless attitude. Meanwhile, the monster also withstood Ronaldo's attacks without being harmed. Ronaldo was happy to meet a worthy opponent. On the other side, Sheeg and Armia tried to hold back the monster, but its speed was beyond imagination. It knocked away Sheeg's sword, then charged toward Lyra, sending her flying. Fortunately, she wasn't dead. The main character was captured by Frenzy, enraging Narcina, who was determined not to lose him. With her skilled close combat techniques, she made the monster hesitate. Armia didn't dare cast spells for fear of hitting her teammates. Narcina continuously enhanced her body, delivering a powerful kick to the giant creature's face, sending it flying. This only made it more furious. A moment later, she was overwhelmed by hundreds of swipes. Despite enhancing her arms and legs for defense, she couldn't withstand it. Nevertheless, her goal was accomplished. The moment Frenzy was distracted, Lost recovered and charged in with a deadly sword strike, defeating the monster. Narcina smiled with satisfaction before passing out from pain. When she regained consciousness, the battle was over. Mr. Mist had also defeated the Griffin, and if the guild leader kept his word and eliminated the Labyrinth boss, then the flame deity would be safe. The group temporarily returned to the inn to rest after the terrifying battle. However, their joy didn't last long. Handsome suddenly appeared, captured Narcina, and took her away through a teleportation gate right before everyone's eyes. The adventurers finally managed to eliminate the remaining monsters inside the town. Now, they could only place their hopes on that protective wall. If it held until the riot ended, everything would be fine. If not, no one dared to guess what would happen next. Seeing the exhausted adventurers, the children brought lunch boxes to nourish them. The situation was temporarily calm, so the kids earnestly asked them to rest and recover their strength. Meanwhile, Lost's group was at the inn discussing how to rescue Narcina. The master explained that this story was related to the legend of the sleeping princess, and Narcina was the person mentioned in that fairy tale. After hearing this, Armia still thought it was just a myth. But the truth was that every 200 years, the sleeping princess would appear along with the evil dragon. Hearing this, Sheeg was shocked, because according to legend, Narcina would have to sacrifice herself to be eaten by the dragon, saving humanity. On the other side, Narcina was brought to Mist. Feeling bitter, she charged to attack him, but was stopped by just one powerful glance from the old man. Taking this opportunity, he asked how much she knew about the evil dragon legend. Everyone had heard at least once that 200 years ago, a creature capable of destroying the world had appeared but was later eliminated by a hero. However, Mist said the truth was different. The evil dragon was never killed, only sealed and pushed back. Moreover, it wasn't just 200 years ago, but also 400 and 600 years ago, it was the same dragon. After each defeat, it would hide to recover its strength, creating a cycle of rebirth every 200 years. Now, the time for that creature's reappearance had come. But this time, the hero had not yet appeared, or more accurately, no one was qualified to bear the title of world-saving hero. According to Mist, the dragon would first appear in the deepest level of the labyrinth. Although it couldn't be eliminated, it could be sealed again through a sleep ritual. That was why he had captured Narcina. Her distinctive blue hair proved she was the chosen one for this ritual. Of course, Narcina had known about this beforehand. It turned out that the one who wanted to use her wasn't just Mist, but also a more powerful force above the Prime Minister. He only cared about minimizing damage when the evil dragon was revived. It sounded reasonable, but in reality, minimizing meant being ready to sacrifice the rest. If there were 100 people, he would only need to save 51. The other 49 dying wouldn't matter. This town had been chosen as a sacrifice. When the evil dragon awakened, it would cause monsters to riot and attack the nearest town to provoke fear, forcing the king to act. This way, the Prime Minister would have an excuse to control all power, from economy to politics. All the townspeople had been predetermined to die. However, Mist didn't want to comply. He secretly built a barrier to protect the town, the wall everyone was now relying on. The two people holding the most important roles were Narcina and flame deity Ralma. One protecting the town, the other confronting the evil dragon. According to Ronaldo's prediction, Mist was at the deepest level of the labyrinth, as that was the only place where chaos could be stopped. To save Narcina and Ralma, Lost's group had to venture down there. Despite knowing the dangers, Sheeg was determined to go along. The other two girls didn't hesitate either, so they immediately set off into the labyrinth. At the same time, after hearing the whole story, Narcina voluntarily went with Mist. Thanks to a teleportation array, they quickly reached the deepest level where thousand-year-old ancient ruins stood. There, a Cyclops appeared, an extremely dangerous creature that only existed on the final level. Mist pointed to the distance, saying that was the Divine Temple, home of the Labyrinth boss. Above, everyone thought this place had never been explored, but in reality, the guild leader had known about it for a long time. When Lost's group arrived, they were quickly discovered and attacked by the Cyclops. The main character rushed into battle, worrying his teammates because the monster's power was too great. But at that moment, an uncontrollable rage was burning within him, almost turning him into a demon. As a result, the monsters were eliminated so quickly that no one understood what had just happened. After the battle ended, Mist stepped forward, telling them they didn't need to show fear. He didn't intend to sacrifice Narcina, but only wanted to test their courage. When asked, he said directly that he couldn't accept the Prime Minister's methods. For him, sacrificing just a few people was more than enough. Ronaldo asked further if those chosen included Lost and Narcina. The answer was difficult to say, but at least so far, no one had died, which was something to be grateful for. Mist wanted this matter to end peacefully, without using the sleeping princess's power, while still stopping the evil dragon. To do this, they had to defeat the Labyrinth boss, as it was the source of magic helping the evil dragon recover. If they defeated it, the riot would temporarily subside, magic would dissipate, and humanity would gain more time. Mist said he would support them but emphasized that humans needed to fight evil themselves. He could only help this one time. Hearing this, Lyra was still worried. She didn't know if there was any hidden plot, as the scale of this event was nothing short of saving the world. Sheeg asked the main character for his opinion, and he just nodded slightly. Even if they didn't fully trust Mist, they still had to try to save Ralma and everyone else. Right after, the boss appeared, a giant creature with only one head, roaring like thunder. The group immediately attacked. It countered with destructive lightning bolts, but Armia managed to immobilize it, while Sheeg and Ronaldo cut off part of its body. Taking advantage of the dust cloud, Narcina charged forward, delivering a skull-shattering punch to the monster, causing it to collapse. Lost quickly delivered the finishing blow. Thinking everything was over, they celebrated joyfully. But in reality, the boss had weakened because it had completed its mission of collecting enough magic for the evil dragon's revival. Immediately, Handsome was the first to be drawn into that evil power. The evil dragon, now almost fully recovered, took over Mist's body, turning him into its new host. Everyone was shocked, not knowing what to do. Handsome fortunately survived, but now the people above were in extreme danger. Mist, now possessed, immediately teleported to the surface, intending to break the barriers so monsters could flood in and cause havoc. Meanwhile, Ralma was still trying to hold on. The Black Dragon, having taken over Mist's body, continuously attacked, confusing the flame deity who didn't understand what was happening. She had thought the branch leader had defeated the Labyrinth boss, so why was this evil dragon now freely manipulating him? Understanding her master well, the flame deity realized the evil dragon must be close to awakening. Lost's group had just escaped from the labyrinth, but was busy taking care of Handsome. The situation had become more tense than ever. It was absorbing energy from around, accelerating its reappearance while preparing for a new wave of destruction. Monsters from the labyrinth flooded toward the city. Lost struggled to recover quickly so he could stop the adventurers facing danger. When they received news about the number of monsters, everyone was stunned. They didn't want to frighten the children, so they hid it, only praying that the barrier would remain strong. Otherwise, the monsters would pour in. According to Ronaldo's observation, if this situation continued, Ralma would have difficulty holding on as her magic power was rapidly decreasing. When asked about the young man's condition, Lost wasn't sure. The wounds caused by the Black Dragon were more severe than normal cuts, as what attacked Handsome was a form of condensed magic, difficult to heal even for other healers. He knew he was hindering the group, so he advised them to stop and forgive their master. Mist was Handsome's benefactor, who had raised them like a parent, as both were orphans in town. Well aware they were always looked down upon and easily exploited by villains, the old man had taught him everything, while he himself was incapable, with nothing in hand. Indeed, Mist needed someone to take over his work because he was an elf. But Handsome felt the sincerity of that person, who never used him as a tool. So earlier, when about to strike him, the old man hesitated, resulting in his own misfortune. At that moment, Handsome was happy to know he was cared for. Lost said he misunderstood, because to him, not only was the branch leader important, but he also considered Handsome a friend. Hearing this, the young man was touched, as he also considered the main character a friend, which was why he had tried to push him out of the swamp before. Narcina, hearing this, thought Handsome was selfish for hiding everything until now, which couldn't be considered friendly behavior. Lost advised her to calm down, seeing the other refuse treatment. The little sister stood up to encourage him, telling him he must live to take responsibility for what he had caused. Seeing this, he continued treatment, hoping his master could hold on a little longer. Below, the adventurers were planning to rush out to reduce the number of monsters. Seeing Manuel's group risking their lives, Narcina was a bit worried. But fortunately, the main character had used money to boost the fighting spirit of others, reducing the burden on the flame deity. Sheik expressed surprise that sometimes she could be useful. Currently, everything was going according to the branch leader's plan, except that he was becoming an energy absorption vessel for the evil dragon. Therefore, they had the responsibility to stop it before it was too late. If they ran, they would survive for some time, but if they let the dragon do as it pleased, the world would certainly perish. Narcina was held back by the main character to take care of Handsome. Bearing the title of Sleeping Princess, if she appeared before the evil dragon too soon, she risked being targeted first. The battle began, with Armia casting spells to attract attention. The dragon, seeing they wanted to die, obliged by creating countless trees to surround everyone. Lost took the lead, coordinating with the main character, rushing toward Mist's body. However, the main character suffered when the dragon used a piercing skill, causing him to fall, his fate uncertain. His teammates were shocked but couldn't help. Lost and Handsome knew Narcina couldn't endure any longer, so they advised her to go there immediately. If late, she might regret it. Ronaldo and Sheik cleared a path for the healer to reach and treat the main character. Narcina moved faster but only saw blood all around her brother, becoming sad and collapsing. Lost's magic was depleted, and the barrier showed signs of failing. At this rate, everyone would die, so Narcina wanted to use herself to save everyone. Her master stopped her, warning that if the Black Dragon ate her, she would die. This was the best way to save the world. Ronaldo revealed that the Sleeping Princess's power wasn't great, only making the dragon sleep for another 10 years, just enough to save everyone. Narcina believed that during that time, Lost would find a hero strong enough to defeat the evil dragon. Her death wouldn't matter much. Lost still maintained consciousness. The evil dragon, seeing the Sleeping Princess, was attracted. Narcina also provoked it to come and eat her, as this dragon was always attracted to the flesh and blood of the Chosen One. Lost hadn't agreed. His power erupted, turning demonic, frightening everyone. The branch leader regained some consciousness and threatened the evil dragon. Lost rushed forward, punching his body repeatedly in anger, losing control of himself. Narcina stepped in to stop him, calling his name, helping him calm down. The evil dragon tried to leave but couldn't, rushing forward and telling Lost to end it. The soul inside the branch leader also wanted this, advising Lost not to hesitate. Lost accepted, and Narcina held his hand as they pushed back the evil dragon. Losing its negative energy source, the evil dragon couldn't reappear and would have to wait 200 years to regain its body. The branch leader was satisfied, praising them for doing well. The magic flow was cut off, the labyrinth riot ended, and the monsters scattered in chaos. Handsome bid farewell to his master, regarding him as his creator. Mr. Mist closed his eyes peacefully. Ronaldo immediately ran to save his lover, and news about the evil dragon was sent to the royal capital. After stabilizing, Armia was assigned by Handsome to become the next branch leader, while he wanted to stay behind to support. Initially, she hesitated, but upon learning the salary, she agreed, determined to rebuild the town. That evening, Sheik asked his master about Lost's condition. Ronaldo said it couldn't be controlled, and the rest would be left for the royal capital to resolve. Although they had pushed back the evil dragon, one day it would awaken again. They set off to find the hero. Narcina also went along. This was what Lost had wanted to say before. A few days later, the couple finished packing their belongings, saying goodbye to the innkeeper and her daughter. The couple prepared to embark on a new journey. If they continued as adventurers, they and the others would surely meet again. The two masters reluctantly parted with their disciples. Lost looked back. He was about to leave the town he had been attached to for so long for a new journey that promised to be full of thorns and challenges.